And first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers. Thank you very much. It was unexpectedly for me, and now I am in the section unexpectedly for me. Anyway, I have to start. I will speak about a phenomenon known relatively long ago, but still not appreciated in full. Syrian and Armenian compact communities appeared in the middle of the 8th century in the northern Macedonia. My point is that the nature of the earliest Bulgarian Christianity is not understandable without its background in local communities of Syrian and Armenian Christians. The archaeologists and historians of architecture were the first who noticed the relevance of these communities for the local architecture and therefore pointed to some literary witnesses related to their appearance in the lands of the modern Republic of Macedonia. In 1968, Anatoly Leopoldovich Jakobson published a seminal paper on the influence of the Syrian and Armenian architectural tradition on the earliest architecture in the Bulgarian kingdom. Then he was dealing mostly with the early 9th century palaces in Pliska. Yeah. One picture from his paper. Jakobson noticed that these palaces have the closest parallels in palaces constructed in Armenia during the 7th century. These palaces were then recently excavated and not widely known. Realizing that his data are severely limited, Jakobson formulated his conclusion as a new hypothesis, but the most plausible among the available ones. The main conclusions by Jakobson is worth to be quoted in extenso. Therefore, a direct I will save time and not reading from the screen. According to Jakobson, these Armenians and Syrians who were in the contact with the Bulgarian Khan's court were the people resettled under Constantine Copronymus. He did not discuss the manner in which such contacts would have been effectuated across the interstate border between the Byzantine Empire and the Bulgarian kingdom. These Armenians and Syrians would have hardly been subject of the Khan already in the epoch of Khan Krum, 803-814. Their territories were conquered by the Bulgarians under Khan Presian in the late 830s. That is certainly later than the palaces in Pliska have been built. Jakobson died in 1984, in the same year when Blaga Alexova, who died in 2007, discovered the two churches in Krupište, Macedonia, near the river Bregalnice, and at the site that she identified with that of the city of Raven, known from the legend of Thessalonica only. One of these churches in this April this year, and the same church, and another church in May. It's an interesting column in the middle. Must be addressed in some particular study. These new findings in Macedonia substantiate Jakobson's claim very much. Indeed, these born Masons who have constructed palaces for a foreign pagan ruler, Khan Krum, would have certainly constructed churches for themselves when they were still within the Christian Empire, that is before the late 830s. All Macedonian churches datable archaeologically to the period from the 8th to the 10th century must be investigated as possibly constructed by the Syrians and Armenians in the late 8th or the first half of the 9th century. For our present study, however, only two localities with three such churches are especially interesting. Strumica with one church and the site of Krupište with two churches. Already Alexova noticed that they were patterned after rather Syrian than Byzantine models. This observation corroborates Jacob Sand's hypothesis on Syrians and Armenians as the constructor of the palaces of Pliska. Literary sources. The available literary sources are mostly related to the events of 752-754. There are some problems with precise dating. The resettlement of Christian, Armenian, and Syrian population from two regions of the Arab Caliphate to the depopulated region of the Byzantine Empire near the Bulgarian border. Nevertheless, a part of the sources refers to the early 9th century situation of the resettled people. The most important city in the Caliphate was Theodosiopolis, the former capital of the Roman province Great Armenia. Was the most the source deal mostly with Theodosiopolis in the former province Greece Armenia, and another big great city Melitene in the former Minor Armenia. I will quote only a part of the sources related to Theodosiopolis. According to the often quoted passage of Theophanes the Confessor, the following took place. The remark, the ending phrase, sentence about Politicians. Theophanes was written in the early 10th using the materials collected by his friend and another Byzantine chronographer, George Synkellos. This means that the temporal distance from the events described was not especially great. However, the geographical and cultural distance was substantial. Nicephorus of Constantinople borrowed in the same or a similar source in his breviarium. He stated that the resettled people created towns, that is certainly they have built churches. Towns, especially policemen, not cities, but towns. Nicephorus mentioned towns in plural that were constructed in Thrace for the resettled Armenians and Syrians. Moreover, he added in his late work that Emperor Constantine bountifully endowed these towns with all necessities. Jacobson aptly pointed out that Nicephorus said here about towns, but not fortresses. It is simply impossible that these towns were without stony churches that would have been no less bountifully endowed. The earliest post-Byzantine churches in Macedonia, patterned after Oriental prototypes, are certainly to be attributed to the Syrians and Armenians and not to the Slavs and Bulgarians. The date of their construction must be later than the 750s, but not later than 850s, and probably even no later than the late 830s, when Northern Macedonia became a part of the pagan Bulgarian kingdom. Nicephorus is, in another work, is also very precise about the locality where was the new home of the resettled people. It was certainly the present-day Macedonia, because we know where was the where the war took place. The Byzantine author very certainly informed well about the locality where these migrants were settled within the Byzantine territory. However, we need the help of Eastern historian for a look at the event from an Eastern point of view to evaluate the scale of this migration. The Eastern chronographers said about the devastation of Theodosiopolis and at least a very serious damage to Melitene. They formed two groups, Syrian and Armenian. The representatives of the Syrian groups wrote in different languages, Syriac and Arabic, and belonged to different faiths, the Melkite Diotelet and the Severian Anti-Chalcedonian, but were not mutually independent. For the period we are interested in, their data go back to the lost Syria chronicle of a Syrian scholar, a court astrologer of the Caliph Theophilus of Edessa. He belonged to the Syrian Melkites and died about 755 785 at the age of 90. The earliest preserved witness of his work is the World Chronicle by Agapios, or Mahbub, who was a Melkite Chalcedonian bishop of the Syrian Hierapolis, present-day Manbij in Arabic, in Syria. He wrote in Arabic. The main point we are interested in these sources is the claim that the population of the city of Theodosiopolis has been removed totally. Then the Arabs soon rebuilt the ruined Theodosiopolis. The parallel passage, also depending on Theophilus of Edessa, is preserved in the Syria Chronicle by the Jacobite, Severan, and anti-Chalcedonian Patriarch of Antioch, Michael the Great, in the of 12th century. He is more precise in an important detail. Emperor Constantine attacked Theodosiopolis, and then, after having submitted, he took in captivity the whole its population, and they left it deserted. Thus, the whole population of the city was taken into Byzantium. Michael the Great, writing in the same language as his source, used disambiguating wording. The destiny of Theodosiopolis in these events occupied chapter 29 of the history by the Armenian Vardapet, priest and monk in the non-Chalcedonian Armenian church, Levond or Revond. He was written in the non-Byzantine Armenia, independent or in some dependency on the Arabs, probably in the late 9th century. Expectably, his account is the most detailed, even though not necessarily the most trustworthy. Levond's picture of the resettlement of the entire Christian population of Theodosiopolis, continuation here, and its neighborhood, taking with them a part of the true cross, is certainly a translatio urbis. It is somewhat a thought with the only with not only the Byzantine but also the Syrian chronographers who considered the operation as forcible. Levond's ultimate sources, however, would have been the closest to the resettled population itself, at least in its Armenian part. Now the fate of the resettled people. Theophanes' mention of the Paulicians is not without interest to us, because it might reveal some tensions in religious matters with the population mentioned, although we know that it was in a large part Chalcedonian. Regardless of the possible contribution of the hypothetical Paulicians resettled in the Balkans by Copronymus, the majority of the resettled population was sharing the main confession of their homeland. This confession were Severan monophysitism and monothelete Chalcedonism. Theodosiopolis Karin became in 631 the place of another after five epochal council, when the mainstream Armenian church, headed by Catholicos Ezra, accepted the union with the Byzantine and the Council of Chalcedon. This Theodosiopolis Council became a major event in the monothelite strategy by Emperor Heraclius. In 701, Theodosiopolis fell to the Arabs. Theodosiopolis will be never regained by the Byzantines until the successful siege by General John Courcois in 949. This historical fact means that to the time of Theophanes, the population of Theodosiopolis has never received a proper anti-monothelite treatment, which the population of Byzantium received, at least after the final condemnation of the monothelitism in 714. It is also obvious that some part of this resettled population belonged to some monophysite faction. Thus, the population removed from Theodosiopolis and Meliten was certainly problematic from the viewpoint of Theophanes' Byzantine orthodoxy. Another Byzantine chronographer, Gregory the monk, Amartolos, who wrote after Theophanes without being especially dependent on him and often following the same source, Theophilus of Edessa, more carefully, preserved, as it seems, a more realistic approach, when the resettled people was considered as simply Christian without any dogmatic charges, and their resettlement was evaluated as a positive act, despite the overall negative attitude toward Constantine Copronymus. All this means that if not for George himself, then at least for his source, presumably Theophilus of Edessa, this resettled population was mostly Orthodox. This is the Vulgate recension, nothing interesting in fact. This is later rework published of Amartylus. So let's switch here. This is the original, still unpublished text of George himself, preserved in the unique manuscript in Paris. Now in provisional edition, I quote from unpublished edition by Afinogenov. My point is that it considered these people as normal Christians. We have to conclude that a new Theodosiopolis must have been appeared in Macedonia shortly after 754. So we have to look in some new Theodosiopolis in Macedonia. In such circumstances, we have to expect the local cults of Theodosiopolis and Miletan reappeared and reshaped in Macedonia. There is no room here to discuss this ample topic, but one observation should be provided. An important local cult of Macedonia is that of the 15 martyrs of Theodosiopolis. This Macedonian Theodosiopolis is localized in the modern city of Strumica. According to their Passion epic, the leader of the group was some Bishop Theodore, without his see being named, and their commemoration date is November 28. However, in the calendar of Constantinople, on this day is commemorated Theodore, the bishop of Theodosiopolis in the Great Armenia. This fact alone is sufficient to demonstrate that the new Theodosiopolis in Macedonia was a replica of the old Theodosiopolis in the Great Armenia, that is Karin, modern Erzurum, and not any of the two Theodosiopolis in Asia Minor, as it was thought previously. The local cult of Bishop Theodore of Theodosiopolis in the Roman Armenia, the main figure of the Council of Theodosiopolis in 591, when the Armenian Chalcedonian Church has been established and her first Catholicos John has been elected, has been transmitted to Northern Macedonia, where it became the kernel of the new local cult of the 15 martyrs of Theodosiopolis Strumica. The cult of the 15 martyrs of Strumica is a complicated phenomenon that must be studied per se. However, the above data are sufficiently representative to say that this new cult appeared as a tree planted on the grounds, in the grounds of the earlier cult of Theodore of Theodosiopolis, Karin, translated from the Great Armenia to Macedonia. When the modern Macedonia has been conquered by Han Presian, its Christian population certainly contributed into shaping the earliest Bulgarian Christianity. Let us recall that despite some legends, Cyril and Methodius have never visited Bulgaria. Some Syriac features are shown at the slide. Oh, sorry. Oh, this slide. This is for the cult of 15 martyrs of Theodosiopolis. In the Church of Strumica. These photos are unpublished so far. This made by some very complicated technique because it is completely obscure, this hypogeum in the church. Some figures are preserved, but in very bad condition, and this fresco need to be studied properly. This hypogeum, about 2 meters and 1 meter. Then some these features are hardly the most relevant, but simply better studied. Thus, it is not so surprising that an authoritative Muslim author of the first half of the 10th century wrote that the Christian part of the Slavs confessed the faith of the Jacobites, several monophysites. Finally, what about Thessalonica? It is known and brilliantly shown by Vasilka Typkova-Zaimova that Thessalonica has been for the Bulgarian Slavs the holy city, often more important than Jerusalem, not to say Constantinople. Of course, we can call this Thessalonica, paraphrasing Gilbert Dagron's bon mot, Thessalonique imaginaire. In another study, I have tried to show that in the epoch of monothelite union, shortly before the Sixth Ecumenical Council, before 680, a Christian mission from Thessalonica working among the Slavs, and this monothelite mission was Syrian. A legendary echo of this fact is the so-called legend of Thessalonica, whose Slavonic text is a direct translation from Syriac. This story is about some Cyril from Damascus, who was not a brother of Methodius. There is no Methodius at all in this story, but became the apostle of the Slavs, giving them the alphabet. He reached the Slavs from Thessalonica, and he himself was under the homophorion of the Chalcedonian but monothelite metropolitan of Thessalonica. What is interesting to us now, it is the fact that the legend of the 15 martyrs still respect this connection to Thessalonica, whereas its Thessalonique imaginaire looks somewhat archaically. Because Anastasia cult in Thessalonica is archaic. It was quite suitable when the competition with Sirmium was actual in the 6th century, but not in the 8th century, for instance. For the time being, the most balanced view on the ecclesiastical structure of this Syro-Armenian Macedonian Christianity could be the following. This is my guess. They preserved their own monothelite or Jacobite hierarchy, but considered themselves within the metropolis of Thessalonica. The nature of their connections with the actual ecclesiastical authorities, then switching between iconoclasm and anti-iconoclasm, has never been well defined. In their own views, Thessalonica was looking at rather an autocephalous church than a part of the Patriarchate of Constantinople. Thank you very much.